Alright guys, welcome to the third variation of a Wyckoff schematic, which is reaccumulation. Reaccumulation is basically when demand continues to overpower supply, which means therefore it can't cause that shift, which leads to continuation, right? So all reaccumulation or even redistribution, all that is continuation, right? So you're going to ask me, how do you distinguish? Right, so that's what we're going to discuss in this video. And the two main things that differentiate reaccumulation and distribution, one is the structure inside the range, and two is, for example, reaccumulation, I usually see double tops right here, as you can see here, right? BCLX and ST, I usually see double tops. So let me just emphasize that point here in the first chart. As we can see here, right, I just put buying climax, automatic rally. Notice there's equal highs here in EG M1 time frame, right? Notice there's a double top here, right? Preliminary supply, there's no peak in volume, like I said before. But the thing here is equal highs, and equal highs to us means liquidity, means target, right? So therefore, when you see equal highs form and you don't see, sorry about that, you don't see a lower low created, then you're more than likely going to continue to the upside. And just to notice here, right, so the cool thing about reaccumulation is usually the down spike after the preliminary supply and the buying climax, that's your range, right? So it's a key point here to look at, which is equilibrium, right? So we see double top, we see a failure to take out previous liquidity, which is here, right? So then we create a so-called creek, right? As you can see here, price, essentially a creek can be a variation of like a bull flag, but I don't like to call it that. I just want to call it a creek just because that's what it is. All right, so notice this creek here, right? It fails to break previous low, but now these are considered relative equal lows, right? So we get the reaction to the upside, right? This is essentially a false move to the upside, right? Especially because you don't really see bullish volume come in just yet, right? But more so, we see bearish volume diminishing, right? So we see a corrective move to the upside just to then take out those equal lows here, and that's now considered a spring, right? So notice this schematic doesn't have a spring. So there's two variations that I use. It's this one, and it's the same one just with a spring, right? And that's here, right? So the cool thing about these is the entry can usually be post spring because you're now understanding where price is wanting to go, right? So you see double top, right? You see a creek form, creek reacted, and then we see our sell liquidity here take out, right? Equal lows being taken out, right? So now that candle that takes out liquidity is now your SC, and as you can see, we reacted perfectly from the open, and that is your entry there. It's probably like a 6 pip stop, and that's a continuation, right? And it falls under the rule that you should be following structure, which means that you should be following continuations, and this is a continuation because we failed to completely break, right, that previous low, right? So here's the cool thing, right? The volume is now diminishing. Seller volume is diminishing, but price is continuing lower. Once again, instability is shown, right? And then after that, we get the reaction from the spring, right? Reaction from the open of the SC, right? And post that, that's when you see that buy volume really start to come in. And as you can see, it's exponentially ascending here, right? And that's what then creates that last push to the upside, which validates this reaccumulation schematic, right? So now we break structure here, right? Take out equal highs, SOS, that's your sign of strength. Now your pullback is your LPS, and from there you just continue, right? So the difference here, right, like I said before, is obviously what's happening inside the range, struggling to essentially take out equal lows or lows period, right? We then get one, basically just a liquidity grab, right? Take out those equal lows, reaction, SC, continuation, right? And ascending bullish volume, right? So now let's look at another example. And this is on GJ, right? This was that range before we got that one final spike to the upside, right? So here we can see buying climax, right? But the cool thing about this one is that buying climax actually, is the peak of volume. And that's a very good sign in my opinion, because that makes me realize that we're essentially starting a schematic, right? So our PSY, right? The reaction after the PSY and then the buying climax, that is your range, right? Like I said before, now that's your equilibrium here, and just notice how price reacts to it. And so then, right, automatic rally fails to break higher high, which is concerning because as here you can see bullish volume is diminishing, right? So now we have to pay attention whether or not this takes out either previous low, creates an SOW, or goes up, creates an upthrust, and we're looking at potential distribution. So as you can see, we create a secondary test, create relative equal lows here, and post that we just see price stall, right? And then now I considered this a creek just because post creek we left equal lows, and post creek we take out previous liquidity here, previous liquidity in the AR and the buying climax, right? You take out that previous liquidity, but I don't consider this an upthrust because this didn't create a significant push and then came out. This literally was just a liquidity grab. So liquidity was taken here, right? Then liquidity was taken here, equal lows, but we failed to take out secondary test and the preliminary supply reaction. We failed to do that, right? And during this whole time, we see bearish volume slowly diminishing, right? So we failed to create lower lows, right? We took out liquidity but didn't create a higher high, but we're consistently creating higher lows, right? Now we created equal highs after taking out that previous liquidity, creating equal highs, reaction to the downside, then we take out liquidity, and that's not considered a break of structure, right? So even if you're unable to enter here or here because you really don't have a reason to, you now have a break of structure here, right? So now the test right here of previous high is considered an inefficiency fill, and that's your sign of strength and your LPS safe entry, and from there you see this just climb, right? Something to notice here too is the second creek here, the one that took out equal lows. This, right, structure the upside, no strong bearish volume, right? So this is creating instability to downside. This is just taking liquidity, right? It means price is taking too much, or it's taking too long and it's doing too much to push to the downside, right? That goes back to law of effort. It's taking so much effort to continue this lower, and there's no bearish volume supporting it, all while bearish volume is diminishing, right? So then that after that reaction, create equal highs, aka liquidity, pullback, and then now you start seeing that bullish volume slowly come up, and then we take out previous liquidity, break of structure, SOS, volume is coming up close to the LPS, which is your potential best entry, and then from there it just goes, right? So structure shifts, volume shifts, reaccumulation schematic. That's basically what you need to understand here. So it's just not about complicating it too much with trying to analyze each abbreviation to its proper place, but like I said, it's more so to understand what's happening inside the range to then predict what's going to happen afterwards, right? So that's basically all I got for reaccumulation. The last Wyckoff video is going to be redistribution, right?